Well, we welcome all of you here this evening. It's been a great experience. As I was thinking about Rocky River, I was called by my cousin Ruth Regula on Tuesday night and asked me to come over to moderate this event since your program chairman was not able to be here. I couldn't help but bring up the book that Carol Lestock had written. And I pulled that out the other night and used it to kind of refresh my memory on some of the things that she had mentioned in the book. And I think our program tonight really begins at the beginning of the 20th century. This would be the year 1900. I reach back into that particular part of the century as we begin our program tonight. There will be three different presentations. The first one will be made by Carol Linsow and my cousin Ron Schneider. So we'll begin with the two of you.
This is unrehearsed, and I just come up with an outline here since we were in the greenhouse business. What do you remember about the greenhouses in Rocky River? Maybe the big masses of glass here and there, smokestacks with the stove, with the smoke being, and piles of coal stored outside of greenhouses, especially during the wintertime. Maybe the smell of sterilizing the soil inside the greenhouse. I remember as a young kid going inside the greenhouse on cold winter days and being warm and being in the sunlight, seeing all the activity as if it was spring outside. Just felt good to be inside, especially in the wintertime. Coal was the backbone of the greenhouse operation, more or less. It was cheap heat, it being that the glass did not really provide much insulation. It took a lot of heat. Cost of coal, years back, especially at the turn of the century, according to Gay Christensen there a few years ago, $1.65 a ton for the coal, $1.65 for the freight. They had $3.30 a ton. That was pretty inexpensive heat. So we didn't pay too much attention to the insulation value of the roof. I remember in 1946, our greenhouse getting a new Ford tractor with a front end loader on it. That was something different. I liked playing with the tractor and finally was given the responsibility of every day after school to load up coal from the stockpile outside and onto a dump truck and take it over to the boiler room and make sure there was enough loads inside the boiler room for that night and the next day. I was about 11 or 12 years old at that time. A few memories from Bill Noble's letter 5 years ago. I know you've all read it, but memories of greenhouses in Rocky River. My first memory is from 1920s, going with my father to the Gasser greenhouses on Worcester Road, a large greenhouse, continued back to Gasser Boulevard today. It was just south of Hilliard on Worcester Road. The greenhouses grew mainly cut flowers. Gasser's also maintained a retail flower shop on Euclid Avenue between East 9th and East 12th on the south side. John Hogue was another man who had greenhouses in Rocky River and Center Ridge. They grew mostly vegetables. John Hogue was a prominent man in Rocky River. Not only had greenhouses, he was a banker and a very good businessman. He was a great, great man. Of course, many of the greenhouses in Rocky River were vegetable greenhouses. I was more interested in the growers for the retail florist business, being that Bill Noble had a flower shop on West 25th Street from 1906 to 1970. I remember the Kramer greenhouses. I was surprised to hear that young John Kramer was leaving his business and returning to the family greenhouses. It's about 1920. John decided to go into retail flower business, built new greenhouses and a retail flower shop fronting on Lakeview behind the older greenhouses, which fronted on the Northview. But John died at an early age. I remember in the 1930s going to the Lars Anderson greenhouses on Northview. the last greenhouses in Rocky River to be torn down a few years ago. Anderson grew flowers, but unfortunately closed during the Depression. The Horton family took over, and it later became the Kaiser greenhouses. I remember the Schneider greenhouses. I would always depend on the Schneiders for their flowers, but then I-90 came along. The Gasser greenhouses was a large greenhouse range for the time, sometime before 1900, I'm sure. They grew cut flowers for the flower shop, for their own flower shop downtown Cleveland, plus for other flower shops in the Cleveland area. They also acted as a school with apprenticeship for floriculture. There weren't any colleges at that time. Many of these early florists and future greenhouse owners and managers got their training and start at the Gasser greenhouse. A few being Fred Schneider, Ed Brown, whose family still has the Brown Floral Shop in Rocky River Drive, Don Brown from the Brown Pleasant Flower Shop, which still exists in Lakewood, and Walter Engel, I remember, he grew into probably the largest floral greenhouse in the Columbus area. Commercial greenhouses, as I've been able to understand, pretty much started in Cleveland. I know when I was in school in 1953, I was told that 1/3 of all the greenhouses in the world were in the Cleveland area. That certainly isn't today. Greenhouses followed the truck farmer, as I understand. Many of the truck farms were on bridges, starting up on Shaft Road, and then continuing out to Rocky River and beyond. And the ridges being the North Ridge, which was Detroit Road, Center Ridge, Moraine was South Ridge, and the truck farms settled along those ridges because the soil on the one side, the soil would warm up early in the spring, and you get a jump on the vegetable crops over your neighbors that weren't on the ridges. But then the competition grew, and they needed to get a quicker start yet, so they started with hotbed frames and started the vegetable plants in the frames and transplanted them out in the fields, and then the hotbed frames came about the greenhouses, and as long as they had greenhouses after the spring crops, I think it turned into winter crops in the greenhouse and became a full-time operation. Many of the greenhouses in the Cleveland area were actually invented in Cleveland. I remember in some of the textbooks being called the Cleveland greenhouse. They were built primarily with pipe frames, pipe for the heating system, just wherever they could use pipe. The pipe was plentiful with the steel mills, Cleveland, Youngstown, Pittsburgh area. There was lots of pipe available. Wood frames were made out of the top grade of cypress, which you couldn't get anymore after World War II. Glass they had their own greenhouse grade of glass. It was the second grade glass. And there was special hardware developed for these pipe frames. The couplings and all the fittings were split. You could bolt them together without doing any welding. And you could build your own greenhouses if you wanted to. So that was interesting. I've got a rundown of greenhouses that I can remember. I'll just run down quickly and bring back some memories. On Detroit Road, starting where the high school is today, was the John Barco greenhouses. On west, a little ways, was the Henry Lovell greenhouses. And across the street was the E.R. Case greenhouses. And just down a little bit further, pretty much across from the Lakewood Park Cemetery, was the Ohio greenhouse. Coming back to Northview, going south from Detroit Road, was Kramer greenhouses. Next door was the F. Schneider and Sons greenhouses, and next door to that, just before you got to Hilliard, were the Lars Anderson greenhouses, which, as I mentioned before became the Kaiser greenhouses. Over on Wager, about where Westway is today, there was a set of greenhouses. I believe it was Warren Lovell, and then Harlan Christensen took it over, and the man by the name of Rasmussen ran it as long as I can remember. Further south on Wager, south of Center Ridge, was the Western Reserve Greenhouse. Now, I'm not sure whether that was actually Rocky River or Fairview, but it was certainly in the Rocky River area. Over on the Worcester Road at Hilliard was George Christensen, the original Christensen greenhouses. Then going south on Worcester with the Gasser greenhouses, and south past Center Ridge were the Rocky River greenhouses. Coming back to Center Ridge at Worcester Road was just west was John Hogue's, and Center Ridge next door was the Herman Christensen greenhouses. Further west before Spencer was the Carl Christensen greenhouses, and the other side of Spencer was the Lake Erie greenhouses, Sonny Christensen. Gives a little rundown, something to think about.
Well, my coming into the greenhouse business was through my dad, who had hauled coal from the mines down Coshocton, Ohio. At that time, coal back in the early 40s was $1.25 a ton to bring to the greenhouses. Every so often he'd bring up a load of lump coal, and that's what all you folks may have used down in your basement to put in your furnaces before all the gasification came in. But those coal mines down in southern Ohio supplied almost all the coal up here to these greenhouses in Cleveland. In the Cleveland area, Columbia Station is where we lived at that time. And during the Second World War, I can remember unloading these coal cars. And at that time in Westview, Ohio, was the Big Ford Railroad that came through there, New York Central. And there were times after you had so much coal removed that my dad would haul truckload after truckload, you had to shovel this down in the pocket to load it. And I would be all dusty and black. But I'd climb up on the top of the coal cars and watch the troop trains going back and forth, and all the GIs waving, not knowing where they were going at the time, but they would be traveling from one post to another. We came to Rocky River in 1946. We lived up on Linden Road in the area. Herman Christensen's greenhouse at that time is now where in the area where the Lutheran High School is. Next door or across Linden Road was the Rocky River driving range. And a greenhouse man's worst fear is a hailstorm. Well, because that hits on the flattened surface of the glass, and it's like a rifle crack. Living next to the driving range, there were always people who wanted to go over the fence with an errant shot, and those would crack down on those panes of glass every so often. My dad would cuss them out because they'd have to go out and repair those. Not only that, but you were liable that there could be glass in the tomatoes, so you had to tear out those tomatoes underneath there. That time from 46 through 1949, he managed the Christensen greenhouse there on Linden Road. And then a little later on, we went over to Story Road, and there was a Rocky River Dahlia Gardens. I don't know if many of you remember that. And Walt Peterson's greenhouse was in the back. There was 19 acres of grapes, corn, we had cabbage. Or something else, when you went to market to take some of these truck farm items, they were packed in wooden boxes. And I think somebody else is going to talk about the Rocky River Basket Factory, which was down here on Lake Road, next to a creamery, which we'll be talking about later too. But that basket factory had a notoriety because they cooked or soaked the logs before turning them down to get all the basket stock to form the basket top. And the smell of that logs, or those logs cooking, was something else. That kind of left something else to be desired. You didn't sleep with your windows open too often with that. But while they're working at the basket factory delivering baskets to the various truck farms, as far out as Milan, to the melon farms out there, and farms around here, Rocky River and Westlake. That was where I learned also about packing, how it was done. We had a printing press in the place where we print a cover. Each greenhouse, each truck farm had a specific set of plates that on this old printing press with a big wrought iron wheel that would go around and around and around to the little motor, constantly printing out basket covers with the greenhouse's name on it. And you had to reach in and pick each one out. There was no assembly line that kicked it out. And fortunately, I have all the fingers on the hand. It's all right. Don't have to worry about that. But that was an experience I remembered too from that. I worked also for Klink Brothers greenhouse construction. Ron spoke about the way greenhouses are assembled, put together. And I received training, if you will, on how to climb those monkey bars, pull the glass out, scrape all the bars, put the caulking down. I didn't lay the glass. That was specialized. Somebody else went and put those down. That was also the highest paying job. I forget what they used to get for every 25 lights of glass. But back in the 50s at that time, or late 40s, 65 cents an hour was your time. The basket factory paid big bucks. That was 85 cents an hour driving the truck. Remember, this was back in the 50s, early 50s. The area, too, that in the Rocky River, they had a mushroom house. Herman Christmas and H.L. Christmas. Center Ridge had a mushroom house. It was there for a long time in the front of the greenhouses. And I guess they raised some pretty big mushrooms. It was well known. We know mushroom houses that are elsewhere now that the manure, after it is for a period of time used, it makes excellent fertilizer. They can no longer grow mushrooms in it. Another job that I had when my dad was in the trucking business, hauling the coal to the greenhouses, was hauling the manure from the farmers, because many of the greenhouses still fertilized with, not chemicals, but with the good material, cow manure. If you wanted for cucumbers in the greenhouse, you hauled in horse manure. Now, you can try that on your own gardens out in your backyard and so on. If you do, let it age for 2 or 3 years, and that will make the best fertilizer, natural fertilizer. Something I wanted to touch on too, on Rocky River, and I mentioned this earlier. You've got a wonderful area to live in here in Rocky River. I think it's a great area to not only raise families, but to see grandchildren raised up. But this area, for us growing up, Ron and I and the rest of the panel, in the 40s and 50s, was just a tremendous period of time. The greenhouse business, like Ron had mentioned too, Shaft Road area, that one summer that I worked over there glazing and so on, it was just as you look down over toward the Canal Valley, where the Cuyahoga River came through there, it was just a shining, if the sun was in the east, shining down in the morning. So all you could see was the glass of all these green. I don't know how many acres were in and underneath glass at that time, but it was the largest area of greenhouses. Over in Berea was the Berea Packing House. don't know if some of you remember on Bagley Road, just after you cross the railroad track, the packing house was on the right side. For those that grew tomatoes and didn't take them to the market, the packing house was the place that you shipped your tomatoes to. And I think, well, that's gone now. It caught fire here. Jack, fill us in on that, okay. But the marketplace, if you were taking truck items, be it lettuce, carrots, or anything, you had to, they were packed in these wooden baskets, and you had to dip them in these big troughs of water to wet them down, and then load them on the truck to be taken out at 2, 3 in the morning to the marketplace. A little secret in the greenhouse business, you just didn't have one vine growing up a piece of twine. You had to learn how to get the optimum amount of tomatoes from these vines. So they would pick off the first 3 or 4 clusters, left enough twine up on the wire above, which you could now lay the plant down, and you'd have room for another 3 or 4 clusters to grow up above. It was only 2 crops a year were grown in the greenhouses. And after the spring crop was when the fertilizer, that's when you ran steam underground through tile to fertilize or to kill any of the germs and so on that were in the soil. It was a very hot job going in, moving the sterilizing paper as you finished each section up. It was mentioned about how do you keep insecticides or using insecticides or chemicals to keep down the bugs and everything. And, I think you can touch on that. We had various methods. They did use tobacco in garbage cans, literally, with a hole cut in it. You take a blowtorch, you close the vents down on the greenhouse, and it would trap the smoke from these slowly burning tobacco cans. And these were used to kill off the various insects and so on inside the greenhouses. You can't very well in your back garden just light up a bunch of tobacco leaves and start a pot. They will arrest you for having a pot fire, probably. But my dad did not go in and own his own greenhouse someplace where I had literally been trained in all facets of growing up greenhouse, if you will. But it would have been a good father and son operation, I feel. Unfortunately, he passed away early at age 62.
Ron, would you like to mention something about the importance of water here in Rocky River?
Bob, you could probably tell us better. But Rocky River did have an early system of municipal water, which is the Cleveland Water Department. And I think most of the greenhouses probably use water off of that system. I'm sure most of the bigger greenhouses also have their own ponds, and they pull out of their ponds. But we did have the availability of the Cleveland water system. I don't know if I have much more. That's it.
Do any of you have a question that you want to ask Carl or Ron before we move to the next speaker? Anyone? Well, our next speaker will be Tom Barrett from the bakery, from the Barrett Creamery, and he's going to talk about a variety of subjects related to milk.
Yes, good evening. Tonight I'll be speaking about the dairy business in Rocky River. First, a little bit of background about dairy business in general, and 2 specific dairies that were in Rocky River. And thirdly, the topic I'm a little more personally familiar with is the family dairy, the Walter Barrett Creamery. By the beginning of the 20th century, the population shifted from rural areas into the city, and there was a need for dairy products and milk in the city, but there was no more room for the family cow. So the people from the cities were buying milk in whatever ways they could from producers outside the city, and milk purity became a big issue. We didn't have the sanitary conditions of bottling were pretty poor. Poor refrigeration. All these things led to relatively short shelf life of milk. So bottled milk helped, but it was hard for a consumer to carry bottled milk. It was heavy and easily broken. We didn't have any refrigerators yet. Everybody was putting their milk in the ice boxes, so it cut down on the shelf life. You needed milk almost every day if you wanted fresh milk for your children. Well, this opened the way for a middleman to deal with the rural farms and set up a dairy processing plants in the cities, and then distribute this milk to his customers in the city homes. And thus was born the neighborhood dairy, or more accurately, the creamery, and the iconic neighborhood site, the milkman. As the 20th century matured, so did the dairy business. The Milk Producers Federation established mandated grade A standards for processing milk. See on here, the old cap on the Barrett cream is everything grade A pasteurized. There were very strict standards for pasteurization and for regulating butterfat content, controlling bacteria and so on. A lot of these bacteria problems were overcome, and that would of course increase the shelf life for milk and make it a much more safer product to distribute to the public. Also had, around World War II vintage, the addition of vitamin D to milk. Now we take vitamin supplements for granted today. It was a relatively new concept in those days, is to put the vitamins that children need in the milk. There were childhood diseases such as rickets and I don't know what other. I think that was predated my experience, but with vitamin D additives in milk, it was something that they were able to get another penny a quart for. Homogenization was also a big product of the milk producers. I don't know if you probably all remember as children how the parents would have to run downstairs in the morning to get the cream off the top of the bottle for the coffee, or the kids would pour it on the cereal. Well, homogenization kind of restored domestic tranquility. Basically what was done with the milk is it was the milk was forced through a piston at a very high pressure and forced through a very tiny hole. And this would break down the butterfat globules and emulsify it into the milk so it wouldn't settle out anymore, so that you had a consistent cream content throughout the whole milk. During this time, about 1910 up until the late 1930s, the individual dairies, both in Rocky River and all the cities, would deal directly with the dairy farmers. A lot of the dairy farmers had relatively small herds, maybe 15, 20 cows, which gave each individual dairy a chance to customize the milk a little bit, in such that different herds, different breeds of cows would have different flavored milk. So you had different milk products. There was a variety of milk. Like some people say, oh, producer's milk is much better than dairyman's milk. And somebody says, oh no, we like Schneider Bruce, much better than Overland Farms. But so everybody had their own taste, and you could order the milk from your milkman